Hi everyone, my name is Kavinraj, and today I'm going to be talking about bridging video games and personality. So first I'm going to do a quick overview of the topic. So 75%, this represents the number of households in the United States with at least one gamer, according to the International Trade Administration. So, with so many people in the United States playing video games, two questions emerged for me. What causes people in the United States to play video games so much? And what factors affect the type of video game a person plays? So, with the help of a research company called Immersive, I was able to isolate these two questions into two separate factors. The first factor being player incentives, where a person is incentivized to play video games. So, for example, daily login rewards and the longer you play, the more points you get. Things like that are player incentives. Then comes appealing to the player's interest. This could be game mechanics, the community, and other aspects of the video game that the player likes and causes them to play the game more. So, after doing some more research on player incentives, I found this one research study called Study Gamification, the effect on rewards and incentives on motivation, by Get Richer, who is a researcher that primarily focuses in researching games and other aspects. And I found out that player incentives is already a proven strategy when it comes to causing people to play video games a lot more. But when I searched for appealing to the player's interest, the only thing, I didn't find a lot of information, but the things I found were, I only found out that interests are interchangeable with personalities, because when a person's individual personality affects their interests and choices they make and things like that. So this led me to my gap. Does an individual's personality have a connection with their preference in video game genres in the United States? So next, I'm going to talk about my research plan. So I had 4 months to conduct my research. In December, I created my forms and I finalized them, but I made some changes after based on user input and reaction to the form. Then in January, I shared my interest form, which is the first form. I'm going to talk more about it later. Then in February, I shared the genre collection form, which collects the genre, and also more information on that later. And in March, I wanted to analyze the data and come to a conclusion for my question. So here are my sampling requirements. I aimed for 30 or more participants in the experiment. I wanted people from the age group of 14 to 18, and I wanted North Quincy Township High School students only to avoid any complications of going outside the high school. So the method of research I chose was a survey research, where basically I would share surveys to participants and get information and then analyze that data to come to a conclusion. So I first had the interest form, where I'd collect general information such as name, age, and grade, and other information like that. They would also collect the consent of the participant, which is needed for an experiment. If the person's below the age of 18, I would ask the parental consent, and if they're above the age of 18, the participant can consent themselves for the experiment. Then I also asked the personality of the individual using two personality tests, the Ocean personality test and the hexagonal personality test. I wanted to use two personality tests to increase the reliability of the personality. However, due to mismatch errors, the personality test scores not matching well enough, I only ended up using the Ocean personality test when it comes to analyzing the data. Then I had a genre collection form, where I asked questions such as the time spent playing video games, and I also had questions on a 1 to 5 scale to determine the preferred game genre. The categories of genre I chose that I organized people into were tactical shooters, role-playing games, puzzle games, and simulation games. And I also asked the participants' favorite video game to ask what they like, things like that. So here's my interest form. As you can see, I asked the name, their grade, the school email, and the grade they're in. And this is the consent form. I asked the parental consent. Before I had it, so it was an actual, you printed out this doc on a Google Doc and actually had to physically sign it and then upload it to the Google form. But then I changed it to an electronic signature because I felt that reduced the number of participants I got. And people found it as a hassle to print it out, scan it, and then upload it again. Then I had the two personality tests here, the Ocean personality test and the hexagonal personality test. Both were about each 120 questions to analyze to find the personality of the individual. Then comes my genre collection form. So again, I asked the name, their student ID, and things like that to organize the person so I know who I'm talking about. And then I have the how many hours they play video games and how many days a week they play video games on average. Then I also have these questions on a 1 to 5 scale. 5 being that they like it a lot and they prefer it a lot, and 1 being they don't really like it too much. And an example of a question I had was, how much do you enjoy playing fast-paced and chaotic video games for the shooter category? Then I also had the specific genre of video games they like. If they like the genre, they would enter the genre here, and if they like a specific game, they would enter that game here. So obviously with anything, I face some obstacles. So an obstacle I faced was getting participants, as I mentioned before. So to fix this problem, I changed my interest form to change the signed consent to the consent the signed consent form to an electronic signature to get more participants, and that ended up working. Got much more participants than I initially expected. And then I also had the genre collection form where I revamped the entire thing because I felt that the yes or no questions and the initial methodology I chose to collect the genre was not the best, and I could have done better. So before I had it, there was a series of yes or no questions like, for example, do you like this genre? So do you like shooter games? And the person would choose yes or no. But then I changed it to 1 to 5 scale questions to get more information on what aspects that person likes in the video game and things like that. I also asked more information on how long the person plays video games and what games they play. And I used a similar study that was conducted in Malaysia to inspire me for the 1 to 5 scale questions. And I made the questions myself, but I took the 1 to 5 scale from that as inspiration. So then I'm going to talk about my data overview and analysis method. So here's my sample. So I got 21 interested participants. 16 out of the 21 participants filled out the genre collection form. 5, I sent the genre collection form out a bit later than expected due to me changing the form a lot. So 5 of those participants could not answer the genre collection form in time for me to analyze the data and everything. I had 3 14-year-olds, 3 15-year-olds, 3 16-year-olds, 5 17-year-olds, and 2 18-year-olds. And although I did not expect it to be so evenly distributed, the even distribution made it so age was not a factor when analyzing the data. Next comes my data analysis method. So how the Ocean personality test works is that you have a series of scores for each category. So there's 5 categories: openness to experience, which is how imaginative the person is; consciousness, which is how thoughtful the person is; extroversion, which is how social the person is; agreeableness, which is how trustworthy and kind the person is; and neuroticism, which is how moody the person is. And each of these categories have a max score of 120. So I organized the scores that they got for each person in a data table and found out of 120 what score they got. Then I got the genre match percentages for each participant. So as mentioned before, I had 4 different categories in my genre collection form. 1 for puzzle games, 1 for simulation games, 1 for role-playing games, and 1 for shooter games. And I try to do about 4 questions for each so the points are even, but like some questions, obviously, some of the sections did not have exactly 4 questions. So for example, if we take how I found the genre match percentages, for example, if we take the shooter category, it has 4 total questions with 5 points each. So that's a total of 20 points, and I found how much that person matches with that genre with how many points they got out of 20. So for example, if a person got 13 out of 20 points, they would have a 65% match percentage with shooters. So here's my data table. Obviously, I blocked the name out for confidentiality reasons. As you can see, I organized each category with the score that the person got. And I organized the RPG, shooter, puzzle, and simulation for match percentages here. On these gaps, if you guys are confused about the gaps, these are people that were not able to fill out the form in time. And I just left them there to show that I got this data. So next is step 3 of my data analysis method, where I graphed each personality category with all 4 genre match percentages. So for example, if I take extroversion and I want to graph it to see if there's a correlation, I took simulation, role-playing games, puzzle games, and shooter games, and graphed each genre match percentage of each person with that score that they got for the game, for that personality characteristic. And then to see if there's a correlation, I used Boston University's correlation coefficient guide to see if there's a correlation between the personalities. How this works is that the closer you are to -1 or 1, the stronger the correlation, and the closer you are to 0, the weaker the correlation. So next I'm going to talk about my results. So as you can see, this is the openness to experience correlation graph. The R value is the correlation coefficient, which is the closer to -1, the stronger it is. So as you can see, RPGs do not really have any correlation, do not have a correlation between openness to experience and RPGs. Shooters do not have a correlation with openness to experience scores. Puzzle games do not have a correlation with openness to experience scores. But I found a weak correlation between simulation and openness to experience scores. Another way you can also find how strong and how much the strength of the correlation is by you can look at the slope of the line. And as you can see, simulation has the strongest slope, the largest slope in the graph. Then comes the consciousness correlation graph. So I had the four things again. I found a weak correlation between our role-playing games and consciousness. I found a moderately okay correlation between shooters and consciousness. I found again a weak correlation between puzzles and consciousness. And I found no correlation between simulation and consciousness. Then comes extroversion. So I found a moderately okay correlation between role-playing games and extroversion. And then I found no correlation between shooter games and extroversion, puzzle games and extroversion, and simulation games and extroversion. Then comes agreeableness. So I found a weak correlation between role-playing games and agreeableness. I found a strong correlation between shooters and agreeableness. I found no correlation between puzzle and agreeableness and simulation games and agreeableness. Then comes neurotism. I found a strong correlation between role-playing games and neurotism. I found a weak correlation between shooters and neurotism. I found no correlation between puzzles and neurotism, and I found a moderately okay correlation between simulations and neurotism. So after analyzing all this data, this led me to my conclusion. And I concluded that there is a correlation between an individual's personality and their preference in video game genre. So next, I'm going to talk about the limitations of my experiment for certain research. So the first limitation I faced was participant error. As I mentioned before, my the personality identifier forms were 120 questions each. So I feel that some of the participants might have got lazy for the 120 questions because since 120 questions, they might have either got distracted or just lazy in general when filling out the form. Then comes a small sample size. So although I initially I wanted 30 or more participants for my experiment, I had a smaller sample size of only 16, which means that even this 16 might have been like the only, there's a chance that this 16 might have been the only people that have a correlation between a personality and their preference in video game genre. Maybe if you go with a larger sample size, you would find a result that's much more different. So that was a limitation I faced. Then finally, poorly identified genres. So although I changed my genre collection form multiple times, I still feel that there might have been a chance that I might have not correctly identified the genre of the individual, and that if I don't correctly identify it, then it would just mess up the data a bit. So I feel that that might have also caused a problem for the data. Then comes my implications. So with my research, what you can do is tailored advertisement, which is basically a company that's tailored, making the advertisement revolving around a certain group of people or a certain someone. So companies can use this research to see that if there's a correlation between a specific type of game and an individual, like a personality group, then they can tailor that. They can put the advertisement in that game, and they can tailor the advertisement towards people with that personality group. This would increase the revenue of the company that's sharing the advertisement, and increase sales and things like that. Then comes with an enhanced user experience. If you know that a certain group of people play this type of video game, you can enhance the user experience to involve the things that they like and avoid the things that they don't like. And yeah. Then comes what's next. So if I had more time, I'd like to see if this trend continues with different age groups. So the age group I chose right now is 14 to 18 year olds, as mentioned before. But I would like to see if this trend still continues with maybe 7 to 10 year olds or 20 to 30 year olds. And depending on how many people play games in each age group, it would be interesting to see if this trend still continues. Then I would also like to conduct the same experiment with a larger sample and more genres, because as mentioned before, the small sample size is a problem. So if you have a larger sample size, it would make the data more accurate. And then the more genres you have, it would be interesting to see if there's still a correlation between the different genres and the larger sample size. The personality of the individual. Because I chose more generic genres, I chose puzzle, simulation, things like that. But there's more specific genres like open world games, battle royales, and first person shooters, and things like that. So here's my bibliography, and thank you.
Okay. After you chose your research question project goal, which information guided your choice of a research method creative process?
So as mentioned before, when I was talking about how I revamped the entire genre collection form, I found a study online when searching for my topic. I found a study online from this experiment that was really similar to my research. That was conducted in Southeast Asia, specifically Malaysia and Indonesia. in that research, it really influenced the way I did because it changed how I collected my data. They recommended using a few personality tests for people that are doing in the future, and I tried looking at those personality tests and I found they were relatively accurate. So I used those personality tests, and I also used the 1 to 5 scale questions from that experiment.
Okay, thank you.
What might be some real-world implications or consequences related to your findings?
So some real-world implications are, as mentioned before, tailored advertising. So companies can, it would be something that companies can do is that they can increase the revenue and sales they make by using information like the research I did. Because if they can tailor the advertisement towards a specific group of people, there's a higher chance that that person will click on that advertisement and like buy the product if they know that, if they have all the aspects that they like. Compared to if you like tailor towards like the entire group of people, then it's gonna be, what's it called? It's gonna be like reduce the sales and it's not gonna be as efficient as before.
Which of your sources was the most influential, and in what way is that influence apparent in your final conclusion?
So, as mentioned before, when I was answering Mr. McCarthy's question, the source that was influential for me was that source about the source about that study that was similarly conducted by me in Indonesia, not by me, by someone else in Indonesia, and that influenced me a lot because, like mentioned before, it gave me the idea of using these personality tests. It gave me like a way to start, which I improved on like later as I found more information on the topic and things like that.
Any other questions?
I'm going to ask one really quick, if that's okay. Did you think or anticipate that there would be certain personalities matching up with particular genres you had in the games, or were you surprised by your results?
Well, I wasn't really too surprised because I knew that there was going to be a connection between. I had like a general understanding that there was going to be a connection between someone's personality and their preference in video games because I knew that personalities have like an effect on someone's interest because I knew that someone's personality had so much effect on someone's interest. So when I found out that there was a connection between the type of video game genres they like and the personality of the individual, I found it not too surprising because I kind of expected that.
How much time do you spend gaming, and what's your genre of choice?
So I used to play a lot of games, but now like because of like schoolwork and all, I don't really play a lot anymore. I try to play on like Fridays, so like maybe an hour or two a day on Fridays. The specific genre I like are more like battle royales and like shooter games because they're like more action packed and like fun in general compared to other games.
I have two. One is for a future area in this research, because I find this fascinating. Did you ever think about surveying the teachers in the building to see who's a gamer, personalities, maybe teaching content and like an age? That would be fascinating to me.
So I chose an age group of 14-18, so I couldn't really like implement that in my experiment right now. But in the interesting, like as mentioned before, in the future, it would be interesting to see if that trend still continues with teachers and like people of other age groups.
And the other thing is, in looking at your surveys and talking to people about gaming, did you find a close correlation between online gaming with other people and how people got through the lockdowns?
Well, I didn't really ask that specific aspect of video games, so I can't really tell if there's a correlation between that.
Because when I was teaching during lockdowns, that's one of the things that I found very apparent, that mostly my boys, but not always, one of the ways they dealt with lack of socialization during lockdown was they went nocturnal and would stay up all night playing with people online, and that was how they kept from feeling too isolated.
Yeah, that's what I did. That's something I did too.
That's a lot of my students did that.
A lot of people did that during COVID because they couldn't really socialize, and that's like the only way they could socialize, like online and things like that, while also doing something fun.
And I think that'd be fascinating as a future research project for someone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good job.